Hello, folks. Welcome to another segment of the Ominous Tower. Let the music go a little bit longer this time, just for the fuck of it. Ooh. Sorry. Just for the hell of it. Oop. Just because I felt like it. Today's topic is a little on the heavy side, so I want to try to lighten it as much as possible with a little bit of humor, and I don't trust my own humor, so I chose this little bit of music to have on in the background, but we have too much of it right now. Let me turn it down just a bit. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? Well, the title's going to read something like A Mark of the Beast for Every Age. I know, sensationalist. I may change it, but it's a topic we talk about lately quite a bit. What is the Mark of the Beast? And I'm here to tell you what I think of that particular bit of pop culture that has sunk into our imagination through the miracle of biblical numerology. 666, remember? Mark of the Beast. Oh my God. Everybody's looking for it, right? I actually had a roommate for a while that wrote a calculator to try to determine which combination of letters or humans' names were the Mark of the Beast. Devoted a fair amount of his lifetime to this bit of coding expertise to try to make sure that he could figure out when the beast was on the way. A lot of people have a lot of energy invested in this. And where there's energy invested, there are those who will look to capitalize on that energy. This is the nature of spiritual energy. Spiritual energy is essentially the currency of the multiverse, not money. Money is a physical representation of spiritual currency. Because if you think I've got a wad of money and I might be able to do something for you, I control your spirit, don't I? Oh, money's a great thing. It's Ponzi schemed spiritualism. And that is essentially what I've been gravitating towards talking about with you more and more as we all observe this great game unfolding. How does this tie into beast marking and how it's affected us through the ages? Let me tell you a little bit about a topic I like to talk about a lot. Spiritual narcissism. Let's get our terms straight. First, as us omnis like to do, so we can try to make our perspective more clear to others, to give them every grounds to refute or amend or suggest improvement to our ways of thinking. Narcissism. What essentially is narcissism? We hear that term a lot these days, don't we? It's like one of the pet phrases of self-help, right? Because you've been abused by a narcissist, you need this and you need that, and you should do this and you should do that to emancipate yourself from the narcissist that has been abusing you. We hear that a lot in culture, don't we? What is narcissism? Anybody know what the original myth was all about? Well, there was this young youth named Narcissus who was so enamored of his own looks, his own beauty, that he took to looking in the river or the lake or the pond or whatever. I'm not sure of the exact origin. Go reread. I don't know. Where did you see that story first? Ovid? Hesiod? I don't know who wrote it down first, but I'm just giving you the broad strokes of it. So enamored of his looks that he got to looking in this stream constantly at his beauty. One day, while he was admiring how beautiful he was, a goddess took note of him and tried to attract him to her charms, to which he didn't pay any attention. Oh, I'm so beautiful. Why would I look at anybody else but me? She got angry and turned him into the spirit of that pond. It's a pretty good story. It's got a lot of appeal. A lot is lost in translation to how we view this word now. Narcissism, in common parlance, is mostly equated with somebody who dominates and manipulates other people to get what they want. Pretty simple in theory, but in practice it has many poles. And if you've ever studied the theory of narcissism, you'll understand that there are two types, broad types of narcissist. There's the overt narcissist, which is the more typical variety for males who have an inflated image of their self and seek out partners who will further inflate that image and support their God fantasy, if you will, their delusions of godhood. There's also the dark pole of narcissism. Well, that first one's pretty dark, but day and night. Let's assume that what isn't obvious to society is not in the light, therefore it must be the dark. Because this happens quite a bit, right? What we think of as light is just another side of dark that we've decided is more acceptable in our society. Okay, the dark side of narcissism is what we call covert narcissism, where we have this sense that something special about us, that our perspective is somehow uniquely right, but no one else sees it. And therefore, if they don't see what is right, then they must be very bad people who are abusing the good people. This is the victim side of narcissism. And yes, it's much more common than the overt narcissism. Overt narcissism is very hard to pull off. Because if you want everybody to think that you're a god, you better have a few credentials to go with it. You better have a good job, fair amount of money, good looks. Who knows what goes with that, but that's harder to pull off than covert narcissism. But covert narcissism is really a much bigger problem because every soul is narcissistic. Repeat with me. Every soul is narcissistic. What is a soul? A soul, in ominous definition, is an individual consciousness going through a series of experiences, either in physical incarnation or in one of the heavens, the most common of which is what I refer to as the heaven of connection, where we go to plan our next incarnation. Yes, there is narcissism in heaven. It doesn't go away. It's an inherent part of the soul, because what narcissism is at its fundamental is this idea that our perspective is valid. And to the extent that we validate that perspective is how strong and what sort of narcissism we exhibit. If we are so convinced that our perspective is right, we will exhibit violent, militant narcissism, who will cling to what they see, what they believe, to the death, who will sacrifice their life for a cause. Now, we know people that have done that we admire. We all do. So narcissism isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's only a problem to the extent that we let other souls manipulate our narcissism, control our narcissism, and get us to do bad things to other souls, unwittingly or even thinking that we're doing good. So, what I'd like to do with the rest of this little talk is to talk about all the poles of spiritual narcissism that we've created over the ages. Okay, so here is one of the biggest poles of spiritual narcissism that has driven everything else. Let's start thinking about the beginning of all things. How did anything start? A materialist will say, oh, it started with the Big Bang. A spiritualist will say it started with God. Who's right? Who's wrong? Which position is more narcissistic? What is the win for the soul that invented the Big Bang? They get to be a famous scientist, maybe. Maybe get a Nobel Prize. Maybe get tenure at a university. What's the win for somebody who comes up with a definition of God that becomes best-selling? Well, that's huge, right? The inventors of Jesus Christ, at least the ones that profited from several hundred years of patience, became the leaders of the Catholic Church and the leaders of the Roman Empire and the leaders of other kingdoms and empires that based their power upon Christianity. What about Islam? Muhammad didn't make a whole lot of money out of his new religion, but boy, a lot of his followers sure did pretty good. They conquered half the known world, and they converted a lot of people, mostly without a lot of coercion, because it was in basis, more fair imagining of what God was all about. That was the whole point of Islam. That's the whole reason it came into existence, is because people are already seeing where Christianity was going, and they didn't like it. They didn't like to be told that, oh, this patriarch in Constantinople, or this pope in Rome, or whatever other leader proclaimed that they were God's mouthpiece on earth, was the one that doled out salvation, that got to determine whether you went to heaven or not, whether you had hope of the everlasting. Now, how did that manifest in earlier religions? Buddhism. Well, nirvana sounds like a pretty good thing to somebody who's tired of the world. Very appealing, isn't it? It appeals to the quiet narcissist, the one who wants to just sit back and do holy things in my corner and be better than everybody else. And through my demonstration of enlightenment, people will come and give me food. Maybe they'll come and join me in an ashram and let me pontificate to them while I get fat and happy and have a relatively easy and free life. That's another pole of spiritual narcissism. What about ideologies? Nationalism. My country, right or wrong. I'm an American. Ich bin ein Berliner. or elitist ethnicity or elitist sex. Men are better than women, women are better than men. Chinese are better than other Chinese. Han is the best. Are you pure Aryan? They're not really Jewish. Spiritual narcissism is written all over our species. In fact, the very existence of different colors and different sexes is almost an invitation to spiritual narcissism. To find some reason why our particular identity is either superior or inferior to others. And to then go to the next step of saying, well, if I'm superior, then it must be for a reason, and it must be because of my superior DNA, my superior education, my superior this, my superior that. And we rationalize why we are in a position of power. And conversely, if we're not in a position of power, we rationalize why we aren't and what perfect plan would make things better if we could only convince everybody to follow us. This would be a good time after this episode to go rewatch Monty Python's Life of Brian. It's the best statement ever made on spiritual narcissism and its role in religion and in training souls and making them more wise through many lives. No, there's not any discussion of reincarnation in Life of Brian, unless you call coming back from an almost certain disaster in space with a bunch of aliens and continuing your life as if nothing ever happened to be considered a form of reincarnation. And in a way, that does touch on a form of reincarnation that is now at work in the multiverse, which we'll save to talk in detail and focus on in another topic, another episode. Anyway, so every manifestation of hubris and the hubris of both wanting to keep whatever we've got and wanting to take whatever anybody else has got is the essence of spiritual narcissism. It basically creates holes of want or holes of need or holes of preservation in us that seemingly will never be filled. If you've known anybody who has any kind of addiction, a serious addiction, you know that they all are about developing a dependency on something that just cannot be filled, no matter how much of that thing we have. And the entirety of commercial advertising is built around creating those dependencies. Now, they're not mostly blatant enough about it to want to create an obvious addiction, because then it might get back to the manufacturer that they were the cause of this problem. So what's preferred is creating addictions and obsessions with shifting priorities of narcissism. And that happens in every realm. It even happens with people that have the most wonderful spiritual intent. If you become obsessed with meditation, with communing with God, oh, I felt so close that time. Oh, I know I can do it again. This is addiction. If you become obsessed with having the perfect diet, with crystals, with tarot cards, numerology, politics, high fashion, celebrities, anti-celebrities, even the obsession with religion can be highly narcissistic, as most failed messiahs will tell you. And this is essentially the whole point of being human. The human soul vehicle was created as a trainer for souls. Souls are beings of pure energy, pure thought, pure spiritual energy. They're not all powerful. They don't do magic tricks unless they're allowed to, because of the pull of other spiritual energies. If you've ever done an experiment or experimented with magnets, you'll realize that, if I take two magnets and hold them together, there's a certain way that they have a strong attraction, and there's a certain way they have a strong disattraction. Souls are the same way. And if there's bazillions of them, which if you listen to me for a while, you'll know that I'll tell you there are not just human beings, not just human souls. There are souls put in charge of every collection of matter and every idea in the multiverse. And these souls can work together, or they can disattract and work against each other. They can even work together unconsciously to produce effects that none of the souls involved ever imagined might result from their conflict. And that's why we can look back on the history of human conflict and see, it was really bad that so many people killed each other in the Reformation, but the net result was this. It's really horrible that fascism started World War II. That wasn't really fascism, but that was the obvious cause. But yet, look at all those good things that came from it. It's really not a great thing that communism overtook the USSR and China, but good things are coming from these too, with a lot of pain and suffering. Maybe it's not the best way that we could have achieved those good things, but it's the only way that we could achieve them in a multiverse that is fair. What is fairness truly? From a soulful perspective, souls are immortal. Well, virtually immortal. The only thing that is going to cause a soul to unexist is for the God that created them to wish them away. The soul is a consciousness. It can only originate from another consciousness. This is the pure meaning of created in God's image. Now, is God the only one that created souls? Of course not. God, the first soul, or at least the only soul left standing from the first times, is just the most experienced one, the one that lit upon an idea for creating other souls that didn't result in the souls annihilating each other or falling into a pattern of domination that was stale and self-destructive, which effectively ends up in annihilating each other anyway, because who wants to be stuck in the reruns of the same series for eternity? This is kind of how, the Buddhist movement got going, is, understanding, the Hindus understood reincarnation and karma, but the temptation was there to say, shit, this is bad stuff, this is horrible, we need to get out of this, some evil god forced this on us, and we don't want to eat that food anymore, we're gonna devise a way to escape from it, we're gonna call it nirvana. By God, if you get to that nirvana stuff, you don't have to come back anymore. You get to be a god forever. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. Reincarnation and karma apply to all souls. They work a little different at different levels. New souls tend to spend their time reincarnating, learning, trying out things and getting slapped down on their face, trying out other things, and that worked pretty well, I'm going to try it for another life. And then you try it from another perspective, and it doesn't work so well, and you learn. You learn what is good about being a man. You learn what is good about being a woman. You learn what is good about having dark skin. You learn what is good about having light skin. You learn what is special about being a dog or a cat or a device manufactured in China. And you move on. Sometimes not. Sometimes you like what you're seeing so well, you go back for another sample of the exact same thing. But you don't always get that, because when you pause between incarnations and you visit the heaven of connection, you have some advisors there. Now, are those advisors God? Are they the angels? No. Hardly. They're just slightly more advanced souls who have decided to play out their fantasies of godhood at the next higher level. You get up to heaven and you want to go back and try another life, or would you like to, come on, be my assistant for a while? I think you're such a holy person. I think you make a really good Christian boot camp counselor. And sometimes they choose to stay up there for a while and be advisors. They don't know everything. They seem like it, because when you go to the heaven of connection, the souls that you are resonant with will all be transparent to you. The souls of your level and below that you are resonant with. And the souls above your level that have that same resonance will look like they're completely connected with you, even though they could be absolutely lying to your face for your own good, or at least so they think so. So it's really another place of training. It's just serves a different purpose than the physical worlds. How do I know this? Think about it. Look at all the narcissists that you're aware of here on Earth, powerless and powerful. What they strive for, how they believe, how they get manipulated and used, how they use and manipulate when they are able to get any power. Doesn't do much good, does it? Yes, there's a few that, maybe they live a very saintly life and they inspire people to a new take on Buddhism or whatever. Ultimately, their followers misuse, abuse, don't really understand, use it for personal gain and validation of their choices. A good example of that is our friend the Dalai Lama. Okay? He was chosen from a very young age to be the 10th incarnation of the Dalai Lama. And then his country was invaded and taken over, and his identity as the Dalai Lama was far more important to him than his identity as the leader of Tibet. Fled to the West and is now giving God food lessons, to millions and millions of avid consumers, propped up by the system, encouraged by all the Western media, and you never hear him speak out for his own people. You never hear him defending the folks in Tibet that are still fighting the regime that destroyed their country, that destroyed their heritage, who is selectively altering their genome to make it indistinguishable from the Han majority. You don't hear any of that. No, you hear, oh, we need to be friends, we need to get along with everybody, because that is how he stays in business. That's how he keeps paying his bills and jet-setting around with the beautiful people to tell the beautiful people wannabes what they want to hear and what the power people want them to hear. He's a complete sellout. He may not even realize it. He may think what he's doing is good. That is the essence of spiritual narcissism. It's unavoidable, and it's never going to be conquered as long as you're able to convince yourself that your viewpoint, what's good for you, is better than anybody else. This is an inherently elitist way of thinking. And anybody who develops their identity by sucking on to some other group and saying, oh, I belong to the Democratic Socialists of America, and that makes me a good person. That's spiritual narcissism. That's like a desperate, covert narcissist looking for somebody to validate their victimhood. And that's essentially what the appeal of communism is for covert narcissists. Oh, we'll give you this place. You can come and be part of our organization. We accept everybody. We're all one. And we all want the same things. And if we just work together against the big bad guy, we'll get them. Because this is just a simulation. This, the gods we've been given, the rulers we've been given, these white supremacist worshiping gods. Don't you see through this by now? It's the same kind of crap that the Catholic Church was spouting when Protestantism started cropping up. And that only fueled the Inquisition. And then Protestants got in the act and started attacking and destroying Catholics for their beliefs. It's insanity. Absolute insanity. And if you're in any of these polls of We're right and everybody else is wrong. I don't care what it is. You know, if you believe that your brand of dog food is going to save the world and only golden retrievers are the best dogs and everybody should have a golden retriever, you are, to some extent, falling victim to spiritual narcissism. If you got a favorite series and you think, oh, if only everybody watched this, they would understand everything about what's going on today. That's spiritual narcissism. I do that too. You know, I've got my favorites, and I've mentioned one in this show, Life of Brian. I'd often talk about the novels of Kurt Vonnegut. Yes, that is spiritual narcissism. I admit it. I see it for what it is. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's only a bad thing to the extent that it makes you blind to the perspective of anybody else. If your whole worldview is built around one particular interpretation of Life of Brian, you're going to be a pretty fucked up person. If your whole worldview is built around The Matrix, you're going to be a really fucked up person. Many perspectives lead to more knowledge and a wider understanding of any topic. That's why we reincarnate. You can have as many lives as you need to figure out what you need to figure out. And it's also why we can't learn everything. These idiots that will tell you that there is some supreme repository of all knowledge, and it's within me if I could just unlock it. I feel the Akashic records seeping out of me at every pore. They're fucking idiots. Anyone who knows anything about the right way to organize a computing system knows one processor can only do so much and can only have so much memory. That's why we'd invented parallel processing, distributed processing. That's why we invented AI. That's why we're inventing virtual realities as training simulations, because we're doing exactly what the gods logically did. And we're doing it with a lot less technology. And that's what the history of humanity has been all about. The Gaia experiment was set up to be easy. And it didn't work because the gods who were sent to the material gods who were sent to start it up and create the human species by splicing their DNA with the local flora and fauna, poisoned the experiment. And anybody that knows anything about social experiments knows that the observer, if they know they're being observed, can affect the experiment. And it all ties back to quantum mechanics, which is natural because all quantum mechanics is the science of the very small souls that are responsible for the most fundamental decisions. Am I spin up or spin down? I don't know. I'm going to watch all the other particles around here and see what they do with spin up or spin down. I just hope somebody pokes me before I make up my mind. This is the course of conversation that might go on in the consciousness of an electron. And to a large extent, it's the sort of conversation that goes on in the minds of first-timers to the human experience. Because they really don't know. They don't have any flipping idea what is right or what is wrong. And that's the God's honest truth. That's why you can't create any system of managing humans that's based on absolute trust. And that includes any authoritarian system. There is no human that knows so much that they should be able to make all the decisions for all the other humans. There is no CEO of the perfect corporation. Bigger is not better. Bigger is more dysfunctional. The only world government that is ever going to work is one of individuals. Humble individuals who understand their own limitations and their own human nature well enough not to grasp at too much power and to allow decisions to be made at the lowest level that they make sense. What's the lowest level of sensible decision making? The individual. How do we encourage individuals to make good decisions? Responsibility. What's the next higher level of responsibility? Being a parent. What's the next level of responsibility? Being the leader of an organization. Being the leader of a community. And the smaller these units, given the problems that we're trying to solve, the better solutions we come up with, assuming that the individuals involved actually care. How do we make sure they care? We make them feel like they're part of the community. We need to make sure that they are directly affected, for better or worse, by the decisions they make, and held responsible for the decisions they make, for the things that they vote for. How do we do that? Trust but verify. If you're going to pass a law to change everything, set up some good metrics that everybody agrees on as measures of the success of the experiment, and plan on making course corrections. How do you think the fairly functional governments of this world got to where they are? Not just because a lot of them were Scandinavian republics who'd seen all sides of fascism, both communist and nationalist, firsthand. That was an advantage that they had, having that in their very recent memory. But there's nothing that they did that we couldn't do anywhere else. They were patient, and they changed, not because this is right and everybody else is wrong. They changed, and then they made sure that they did user acceptance testing. I mean, shit, you've only got to look at how successful tech companies introduce new products to know what it takes to develop products for humanity that actually work for humanity and not for the bottom line of the CEOs that are funding the whole thing and making the final decisions. And you can talk to anyone who's worked for a large global multinational corporation, and they will tell you, if they're honest, that their management doesn't know their head from their ass, because they're so far removed from what's actually going on with the products that they will tell them to do blindingly stupid things that they think are going to make the company successful or keep them successful, that ultimately cause companies to collapse. And the only good thing about the corporate system in a functioning free market economy is that ability for unsuccessful companies to collapse. As soon as the system starts working for the preservation and benefit of the companies, you're not the human anymore. They are. The companies become the premier citizens in this new dystopia. And you're just one of the atoms that makes up the new super being. And maybe that's karmic justice, because the oversoul of a corporation, maybe that is a more important oversoul than you. But I don't think those are the oversouls that humanity really wants to be ruled by. At least not in an authoritarian, totalitarian way. And that's where we're headed with the current incarnation of globalism. Whether it's under UN, a fake world democracy, or under one of the superpowers, a real totalitarian disaster. And yes, that's exactly what both Communist China and the United States look like. Communist China is much more overtly totalitarian, but anyone who's lived through the pandemic in the US knows that it's on a crash course for the same sort of thing. And in fact, they've been developing the technology for authoritarianism under the cover of the Great Firewall in China. Yeah, that's the real game going on. I'm probably going to get blocked just for talking about this, but if you look at the history of covert operations, where did they all go when Congress started investigating MK Ultra and these other shady research projects of the deep state? They just said, oh, we're not doing that anymore. No. They outsourced it to corporations, and corporations outsourced it to China. Because everybody had lost sight of the whole game and were just trying to get what's in it for me. And that all ties back to spiritual narcissism. When your God becomes yourself, that is the most narcissistic position of all, because what's good for me is what's good for God. And this new age cult of cosmic oneness is the most dangerous ever conceived because of that. When you get the idea that you are just God experiencing the multiverse from this one perspective, you could be irresponsibly doing anything that you want and thinking that, oh, won't God be so impressed with what I taught him? Won't I be so impressed with what I taught myself? Oh, I'm going to have expanded the consciousness of the universe so much, I can't wait to go get my award. You see how you can take something that sounds pretty good and twist it into a dystopian nightmare just by looking at the narcissism of the thing? And we're all narcissists because we have a point of view. We have what we've observed, what we've experienced, and an innate desire to say that is more and more valid than what you experienced. And this has allowed people to basically disregard thousands and thousands of years of people trying to share and record their spiritual experience. No, that didn't happen. They were just deluding. They must have been on some kind of drug or something like that, or they should have been in a mental asylum. How many times have you heard somebody else write off another's point of view with that argument? So I'm going to challenge you. Next time somebody is telling you something you don't want to hear, don't just shut them down. Hear them out. Have a discussion. Say, well, did you think of this? Wait a minute. Now, aren't you making an assumption that this is so? And how do you know that's so? And don't make it into an existential crisis if you don't agree. Agreeing to disagree is probably one of the most mature things any soul can do. And it's probably the only thing that's ever going to get you catapulted to the level of consciousness that the creators, the senior creators, occupy in the spiritual world. they not only agree to disagree, but they say, okay, we're at an impasse here. So how about everyone who's all wrapped up in whether this is a good or a bad idea? All right, let's go and prove it. Let's create a planet. Let's create a new species. Let's give them the seeds of the experiment you're trying to prove or disprove, and let's leave them alone to the greatest extent we can and see how they solve this problem. Without our vast knowledge, well, maybe with a little bit of it, gods are allowed to inspire. They're not allowed to interpret. They won't tell you exactly what you need to think of any divine inspiration. They won't tell you that you need to write Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, Beethoven, you stupid idiot. They inspire. They come to a lowly patent clerk and give them this vision of a way to explain gravity better than the accepted wisdom of Newton. Oh, God, Newton, I'm going to go against everything you ever told us because I'm a lowly patent clerk in Vienna, or wherever he was, I don't know. This is how it works. You're not going to get the answers in a crib note from God. If anybody tells you they are a charlatan. All divine inspiration is just that. And it's up to us to interpret what we get through the filters of our own bias and our culture, the cultural bias we grow up in. And that's why there's no one prophet. There are many prophets of many things, not just religion. They are all receiving inspiration, which is designed by both sets of gods, the ones who want this experiment to succeed and the ones who think it's full of hooey, to push the test subjects in a certain direction. And that's how creation works. It works. It's a shared experience, not only of creation, but of implementation, testing, and bug fixing. It works exactly like developing software. Developing hardware, too. Hardware is just a little harder. And what are thoughts? What are our writings? What are our ideologies? What are our ideas? What is our art? They're all the same thing. I have an idea, I test it by putting it on canvas, putting it on paper. And it's further tested by the rest of the world in how many likes, shares, and subscribes it gets. And it's tested by the systems of the world in terms of how fair those likes, shares, and subscribes are versus how valuable the ideas are. And what you're seeing now with the silly world of social media and big tech corporations and big media is folks trying to game the system for their own benefit. Always happened, always will. The average tech CEO is no different than the average pope or the average Buddhist guru or the average communist dictator. They've got too much power for their own good, for anybody else's good, and they're basically running amok, taking on karma. Is that a bad thing? It is for them. They're gonna suffer long and hard for it. In the grand scheme of things, all they're doing is putting more pressure on this Gaia experiment to make sure that we've worked out all the bugs. So, Before I terminate this segment, or somebody terminates it for me and you never see it, I'm going to tell you again, what is the Gaia experiment? Why are we here? Why does this silly planet exist? Why does the human species exist with all its flaws and foibles? Sorry. Somebody doesn't want me to finish this segment. Come on, boys, settle down. Let's take a drink before I tell you again. Okay. In the process of defect fixing of a major spiritual experiment, one finds ways to invent technologies, spiritual technologies, that would never have occurred to a being of pure consciousness, a being of creation that could imagine something and have it materialize. And that's essentially what the senior creators started out as. That's how the physical universes started existing in the first place. And they exist now bounded by laws that were devised to keep these experiments in line, keep them from collapsing, exploding. So were all universes expanding like ours? No. Some collapsed right away. Some never even got off the ground. Some reached a certain maximum extent, and then entropy kicked in and left a very stale thing left behind that some other universe had to come and clean up later. This experiment is primarily centered around the most fundamental fact of human existence, which is that we don't have, at least most of us, don't have the ability to do all the things that gods can. Not that many people are able to use telepathy or telekinesis or control fire or whatever, or melt objects with sound. Now, did those technologies exist? Do they exist somewhere? Well, yeah, probably so. Because they could, and if it's something you might think, it can exist. Because physical existence is a manifestation of thought. All physical existence is a manifestation of thought. Does that mean you can think anything and make anything? Now, here's the catch. Sure, you can think anything, and it comes into an existence for possibly an infinitesimally short period of time, especially if it doesn't hit the bestseller list. And if it's not something that is going to take over the multiverse, is going to change the pattern, the prevailing patterns of what's going on, it comes and goes and, maybe becomes part of a parallel universe where people go to get ideas for science fiction stories or fantasy stories. And those exist too. They're very popular. The fiction that we've created on this planet is incredibly popular. It's had an interesting side effect of giving the folks who decide to stay up in heaven a sort of voyeuristic life watching what we're doing down here, which kind of an unintended consequence, but that's one of the most important pieces of this whole experiment, because one of the problems with reincarnation and karma was finding ways to motivate gods to incarnate. Imagine if you got all the power of a god, if you're the god of weather, okay? You can make weather anywhere on the earth. Hey, that's pretty fun. I'm gonna go piss on that guy because he took my name in vain. And if you can get away with that for a long time, it's pretty fun. It makes you feel like, I'm gonna go send a thunderbolt on him. Why would you want to end that? Why would you want to go take a human life and forget all of your powers and forget everything that you could do and become Joe Schmo in Schenectady for a lifetime? It's hard to talk them, and we can't just force people to do things, because the exercise of force creates a counterforce. And that counterforce, when you ratchet a soul and say you must do this, creates this counterforce of, oh, you're oppressing me, you're taking advantage of me. And this is the root, this is the essence of spiritual narcissism, huh? On both sides. The person who's exercising the force is saying, my point of view is more valid than yours, and the person who is getting exercised on feels oppressed. Now, does that mean that we can't exercise force on anybody? No, that's impossible. Especially, well, I suppose you could do that as a soul and just isolate as a god. You could go isolate in your own universe and sit and stew on your meditation and not let any other soul come near my universe because it's so perfect already. And of course, in incarnation, we step all over souls all the time. You cannot possibly get through a human life without taking another soul's life, even if it's just an ant that you happen to step on because you weren't looking where you were stepping every day. Even if it's the vegetable that you think is the most holy thing I could eat is a vegetable because they have no life. Did you ever try eating rocks? Oh, lots of minerals there. They have life too. Everything has life. Everything has a soul. Do souls like to be ingested? Some of them do. Viruses love it. Oh, good, a new host organism to invade. Some just don't mind. The average deer that gets killed for supper, their point of view is that, okay, I know I'm going to die eventually. If I die giving sustenance to another being, I just hope that they appreciate it. And they'll remember me. And that's essentially the root of saying a prayer over our meals. It's not to thank God. It's to thank the souls that provided that meal. To thank the souls that are sharing the meal with us. To thank our bodies for hopefully making the best use of whatever we've been able to give them that day. It's just another form of communion. And even though communion has the same root as communism, it's not the same thing. Communion is sharing perspectives with different souls, sometimes very different souls, from different species, from the souls that we never even think of, the soles of our feet. Communism is forcing your perspective on others. In essence, that's what communism is all about. An elitist perspective forced on others. And from that standpoint, spiritual communism is rooted in every man-made religion. Every religion of control is a form of communism. And to the extent that that control becomes more important than any good that's done by the system of control, it is evil. That's why communism has so many adherents, because, yeah, a lot of other systems have inherent unfairness, unequalness, and dystopia. That's not a reason to tear them apart. If God worked the same way as you bonehead humans are doing in trying to make your planet better, it would have taken another 12, 13 billion years for the Gaia experiment to be conducted. Because, oh no, we can't start with the Big Bang. No, we can't start with that species from Orion. They're just so fucked up. And no, Arcturans, we can't let them participate. Zeta Reticulans, are you kidding? We can't let them touch Earth. You use the technology you have. You use the systems you have. You throw out what doesn't work. And you take the best of what does work and make it better. I can tell you for a fact that the best system of government that the human species ever developed is the Republic. Why? Because democracy is the rule of the masses. If you can get everybody to vote for something, everybody's going to want ice cream. Republic is the rule of laws that are made for the benefit of all people, considering all points of view, considering all the minorities, demographics, economic and political positions, and weighing them and making compromise to do the best for everybody. There is no government in the world that is going to make everyone equal. You're not equal. You are a soul experiencing an incarnation in a human body. Where did that soul come from before that human body? Who knows? Some of us have had millions of lives before, in whole different species than here. And, I mean, just do the math. How many souls, how many human incarnated souls are on this planet right now? Around 9 billion? How many were here 100 years ago, 200 years ago? Do the math. There's a lot of souls experiencing humanity for the first time or just the first few times. And it's not an easy soul vehicle to drive. And it's not for everybody. Some souls are not suited to being human. They don't thrive in an environment where you have a lot of choices. And these are the souls that are hankering for, oh, save us with some authoritarian governors. Tell us exactly what to do every day so we can feel safe and happy. Those are not the souls that belong in this species. And they're not going to be coming back after the next incarnation or two. The experiment is over. Humanity's service as the test vehicle for the Gaia experiment is finished. We're in cleanup phase now. So try not to do any more damage during this life, and look forward to the experience of the heaven of connection you're going to get next time, because it's going to be very different than anybody's told you heaven was like before. If you want to have a sneak preview, I advise you to go take a look at the work of Dolores Cannon, who does past life regression therapy. Past life, future life, all lives are the same, and that's the nature of time. And we'll talk about time some other time. But if you don't believe in reincarnation, take a look at the work and tell me it's not the real deal. It's time to start getting back in touch with spiritual truths. And I don't mean taking the pronouncements of some guru, some philosopher, some self-proclaimed expert in self-help spirituality. And, oh, that's nice, I'll cling to that because I can make anything true. No, this is not the way it works. Religions exist because they provide some value for some souls at a certain stage of their journey. And from that standpoint, all the world's religions, even cosmic oneness, have a certain use and utility. That doesn't make them truth. That makes them a close enough approximation to be useful, just like Newton's mechanics, as opposed to Einsteinian relativity, as opposed to whatever comes next from the physics world in terms of the grand unified theory of everything. The ultimate truths are very difficult to grasp, and if you had every term in the grand fractal, it wouldn't make you the smartest soul in the universe. It would make you probably the busiest one trying to figure out what all they meant and how they manifested. Simplifications are the only way that souls can deal with the limited perspective that they have given the number of incarnations they have. And even the most experienced soul, which I think is probably this first soul that I refer to as God, and most people would say that some such conception exists, doesn't have the universal perspective. Probably knows a lot more about how the divine fractal is constructed and some of the main principles, has a certain deeper knowledge of the primary rules that give it its structure, give it its patterns. Doesn't know everything. Why would anybody want to know everything? Do you think any soul that was that anal would ever get to be the ruler of heaven? God, what sort of heaven would that be? What sort of world would we have if we had somebody that was that anal in charge of everything? Anyway, I've gone over the hour. Hope you've enjoyed this one. And come back again to the Omnist Hour. Like, share, subscribe if you like. Or you like to share. Or you like to subscribe. Or don't watch it all because I don't care. It's not important. I'm not here to convert anybody. I'm not here to convince anybody. I would love to have a good discussion or argument about anything I've presented today. But it really doesn't matter what you do with it, because this may be not the right time for what I'm saying, not the right audience. Maybe this species isn't ready for what I'm sharing. Or maybe I'm sharing something that is totally unuseful at this juncture of our history. If it is, it will be used. Or some other souls will express it in a way that is more accessible, more usable, and they'll make $1 bazillion and be on the Letterman show or whoever is the latest craze for late night. I don't care. I don't need that. I don't want that. I know what I know, and I know where I'm headed. And I'm happy. I only hope the same for all of you. Take care. We'll see you next time.